Welcome to the podcast that is designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering here at Telarus. Today, we are on talking security, but we're talking with Ben Bohman, the man with the most well-manicured beard in the channel. He's also the director of Solution Engineering for Comcast and Masergy on the indirect channel. Ben, welcome on, my man.
Hey, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So today the track is, why should I not run a security operations center on my own? Obviously, from the customer perspective. So Ben, before we kind of get into a little bit of the why and your product sets and some deals and things like that, I want to hear your story. Talk to me about your personal background, how you got into this world. Is it a linear path and you always wanted to be this, or did you have some crazy jobs along the way?
Yeah, I'd say this definitely wasn't linear. And even working in technology was kind of an odd, like if I go back to like my days in high school and what I was focused on, definitely nothing in technology. In fact, when I got my first technology job, I had never even owned a computer at that point. But anyhow, I was reading a newspaper at a Denny's. I was working as a waiter at Denny's when I was 18 years old. And it was back when the MCSEs were getting very popular, right? The Microsoft certifications were gaining traction. I'd heard some side people talking about people making a ton of money as an MCSE. And that really was the motivation. I was like, well, maybe I don't have to work at Denny's anymore or something like that. And so I went and signed up for a MCSE course. Ended up getting my certification, was hired by a friend of mine who was running a IT department. He was an IT director for an international printing company out in Utah. And he hired me on just part-time to give me a little bit of experience. And that just kind of took off from there. He actually quit 1 year later. I started running the computer department after like 1 year of total computer experience.
Awesome.
It's all surreal to me. I mean, literally, like he gave me my first computer as a Windows 95 by 86, a 3 by 86, like Windows 95 machine, because I didn't own one. But I just somehow picked it up. I mean, Google was my best friend, right? I just would Google everything. And within 2 years, I was running the department, and it just kind of organically worked out. And then I ended up getting into the consulting side of things after that. And I think that was great experience, seeing that buying side and being the IT director. And then also like getting into the consulting and understanding that, but understanding the pain points that you have when you're dealing with vendors, especially the communication and all those kind of problems in technology. It helped me a ton.
So what I heard from that is that next time we get together, we're going to Denny's.
We're going where?
To Denny's.
Yes, Denny's. I was a great waiter at Denny's, and what's funny is I always talk about like EQ over IQ when it comes to technology and engineering, right? I always talk about that, and I learned a lot of those soft skills that being a waiter, like learning how to communicate with people, talk with people. And I think sometimes, obviously, you're great at it, but I think that's one of the issues that we have in engineering is there's a lot of engineering who can design and know technology, but they can't talk about technology in a way that makes sense to other people.
100%. We talk about it for SE. We talk about, do you want big S little e or little s big E?
Yeah.
And I think the idea of big E is gone. It's the big S that certainly prevails.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about more, a little bit more about how companies look at, especially, I know we're talking about SOC today and everything, but how companies look at that. And that's why the big S is so important.
Agree. So let's talk about your current role. Really your current role, then talk to me about the whole Masergy Comcast thing.
Yeah, so my current role is the director of solution engineering, like you said, for the indirect channel. So my role and my team's role is a dedicated engineering resource for the channel. We just talked about that soft skill, right? That engineering skill as far as being able to tell a message and talk to a community of sellers that don't really understand the weeds or get into the weeds of technology, right? And that's what my team does is we go out and we talk about the technology, but we more talk about how are you leveraging the technology? How do you speak about the solutions that we offer and use that to open doors? So we're having technical sales training almost with the partner community, just helping them, again, understand how to open the door. And I think when you're talking to the partners, the most difficult thing isn't really having the conversation with the customer, because once you're doing that, you brought in you, right? You brought in your engineers, you brought in the vendors, engineers, and the experts. The most difficult thing in sales is actually opening the door and having that conversation. And so when you can tie that technology into something that's relevant to the partner community, it just really, it really means a lot to them. It resonates. They're very appreciative.
So talk then about. I love the approach. I agree. I think you do a phenomenal job at that approach, and we really love that. You know how much we can lean on you, and it helps us. It makes our job easier. And so, there's this convergence with the Comcast Masergy side.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me. I mean, I think we're just talking about a subset of the product sets that you guys have today. But
Yeah.
talk to me about, you came from that Masergy side, and I want to have the partners that maybe haven't worked with the broader family of the Comcast and Masergy. Really, what's all consistent in there from a product set? What's the approach?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the core of the product set, right? If you want to call it the pillars or the three pillars, and this is, you could almost say the three pillars of many technology companies, right? Security, voice and collaboration, and network. Right. I mean, and if you just sum it up to that, like that's really still nothing's changed, right? I mean, that's still what those three pillars are. In fact, that's still what Comcast three pillars are. There's a couple things that I think both of us have done. And the way I look at it is Comcast has become a better company because of acquiring Masergy, and Masergy has definitely become a better company because of that acquisition. So Masergy has always operated on a global scale. That is one thing that Comcast has never really been able to do. They've never been able to get into that global, the global deals, those bigger deals that again that spread across every nation,
Mm-hmm.
which we're able to do. Now, what we weren't able to do, especially like where most of our funding was with VC, private equity, things like that, is we weren't really able to scale. So we had the solutions, we had these very advanced and very unique solutions, but we were never able to scale those solutions because once the venture capitalists like made their initial investment, they don't really invest more into like that R&D. So we get great R&D up front, we get great investment up front, and then it kind of taper off. Now with Comcast, I mean, we're going from a decent sized company to working for a $200 billion, $250 billion company. So now that budget changes, and what we're able to do and what we're focusing on now, especially in the security sector, is really changing. So it's been great. I mean, I was hesitant, honestly. Like at first, I was like, I didn't see that coming, but it's been really pleasant.
So yeah, no, good point. Talk to me about. I mean, you've got a lot of background on the security side. You see a lot of things, and I know we just summed it up with security and connectivity and voice and that. What do you like most about this? What, of all the things you get to touch, of all the parts of your role, what do you like the most?
Well, I'd say, and this goes with security, but technology. And I always like having that bigger technology conversation because I think, and especially when we're talking about security now, security touches every aspect of a technological ecosystem, right? I mean, you have to agree that we can't talk about voice, network, cloud applications without talking about security. So when I look at technology and what I've always loved about it, and even talking when I was 22 years old, right, I just became an IT director. I like the business strategy. I like solving business problems, and I always talk about that. And when, of course, Josh, when you hear me talk, I'm always talking about we solve business problems, not technology problems.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love going in and almost reversing what's done. Like right now, we talk about a lot of engineers go in and they say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do to solve the problem. And so immediately they get on their problem solving. This is what and how we're going to do it. But they don't go into the why are we doing it? Like why is it needed? And that's what I like. I like looking first at why is that technology needed? Why do you need maybe a SOC as a service or an MDR platform? Why do you need SD-WAN? Why do you need any portion of technology? And it's interesting, my CEO, when I go back to my, or president of the company, owner of the company, to my starting days in IT, he sat me down and he's like, look, I don't really care like how easy your job is. He didn't mean this rude. He's like, but what I care about and what your job is to do is to make everybody else's job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so right there from a young age, 22 years old, I was taught that, look, I'm brought on board from an IT standpoint to solve business problems, to increase productivity, to make the company money. He didn't want to use IT cost center. He wanted me to turn IT into a profit center. And so again, that's just kind of given me this passion of I love looking at things from a strategic business standpoint, not just a technology standpoint.
Love it. Let's talk about innovation here. We're going to get into SOC and maybe a little bit of MDR and all that good stuff and what that is, what it means, what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
But talk to me for a second before we get into the OEMs and all of that. Talk to me about innovation. You talked about, what your ability was to do previously. Now, given what you're part of, what's the approach to innovation, right? If we're we're
Mhm.
we're kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but how does the Comcast side of things and the Masergy side of things now approach innovation to stay in front of what's next?
Yeah, and I think this just ties into how the story of Masergy is developed. And now the acquisition of Comcast is further developing it. So Masergy, at its core, is an engineering and innovation company. Right? I mean, that's like from the beginning time where I started at Masergy. That's how we talked about it. So when you look at how we have invested the money, let's say, and I talk about the VC firms coming in, they invest, and then you don't get quite the investment. We have a very small sales team. I think overall 24 sellers in the whole company of Masergy. So going back into the roots, we'd have 24, maybe 30 sellers. And we relied, of course, on the partner community, right? On great partners like Teleris and such. So they didn't invest heavily in sales. And I think that's where a lot of companies do is this heavy investment in sales and just trying to get as much,
Yeah.
again, sales. I mean, they're not really looking at the quality of it, just the amount of it. Masergy did a different approach where they focused on engineering. So we are very engineering heavy. We are very R&D heavy. If you look at what we did with software defined networking at the beginning, we were doing SD-WAN through our core network before SD-WAN was even being talked about 20 years ago. Then you get into the security aspect, and we developed our MDR, or managed detect and response offering, which you can also call the SOC as a service, or MSS, depending on how you look at that. We invested in our own proprietary SIEM, our own security analytics engine. So of course we still do use that best of, I don't really like best of breed, but best of platform
Yeah.
approach, meaning we have managed Sentinel-1, managed BitGlass purchased by ForcePoint, and we put this all into this security analytics engine through, again, R&D. Now, what's cool with Comcast coming in is Comcast is coming in with obviously a larger wallet. They're coming in with an eagerness to expand these services and grow these services. And really their primary focus is what we're seeing in the industry, and that's security. So what we're tracking towards is not so much towards a SASE type of, everyone's chasing SASE, right?
Yeah.
But we're more approaching that SSE approach, right? That security service edge approach, and that's where all of our R&D right now is going into. In the next year, within the next year, you're going to see a significant, improvement in what is already a very strong offering with us. When you're talking about SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, and all those.
So let's you touched on some really key things there. Let's dive in further too as we're expanding what is in the security realm for you. You talked EDR, MDR, you talked Sentinel-1, we
Mm-hmm.
talked we talked BitGlass. Let's lay out either all those OEMs or OEMs and products, and then let's dive into how that kind of feeds into your SOC offering.
Sure. And let's actually start. I'm going to even take one step back of something we don't mention. And I agree why we approach security this way. So obviously that first layer of defense is most often your firewall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so our first SOC offering, when you talk about how is that security operations center, or what are they initially looking at? And that starts with a firewall. We use Fortinet, and that's a TMR, or a threat monitoring and response service, right? And so I think that's where we start when you talk about an OEM or a SKU. That threat monitoring and response has a lot of visibility, a lot of proactive updates, a lot of proactive responses to that, what I call that north-south traffic, right? What's coming in and out, and looking at that. So that's that first layer. And I always talk about defense in depth, right? When you're talking about security, it's not having one layer of defense, it's having in-depth defenses to block all these vectors of attacks that are coming at us nowadays, right?
Yep.
So that's that very first layer. Now, the next layer, and let's just talk about the most simplistic layer, but still key, is that east-west traffic. So now we've got our EDR, or endpoint detect response, and it's really a managed Sentinel-1 offering. And what that's protecting against ransomware. And you could call that next generation virus protection. because instead of looking at signatures, it's looking at behaviors.
Right.
So it's looking a ransomware doesn't go in and have it the same kind of look and feel every single time it goes in. They're adapting it to the company, to the environment, and everything, connecting to different IPs, setting up processes within it. So now we're looking at behaviors within that environment. That is also managed by our SOC. That to me, honestly, is the biggest bang for your buck in the security industry right now. Just, it starts at $7 a seat. I mean, with
Yeah.
managed
Killer.
Sentinel-1 with a SOC wrapped around it and remediation capabilities. So I just, it shocks me that it's that low. And it's really, it's a big deal with our customers and with our partners. So we're making a lot of progress with that. Now we go into CASB, which is that cloud access security broker, right? So how are you protecting your Azure environments, how you're protecting your Office 365 and those cloud environments. Now, I will say that CASB, I think that's going to be really taking off probably in about a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it's part of that SASE, the ZTNA, CASB, it's part of that SASE framework that we talk about, but it's going to gain momentum. I won't say it's there yet.
Yeah.
The need is there, but it's not as big of a need as it will be in 2 years as we continue this cloud migration, right? This edge migration for security. And then the last portion of it, of the SKUs that we offer is our MDR, managed detect and response. Again, SOC as a service. I try to use different acronyms because there's so many, right, in the industry.
Sure.
So SOC as a service, or MSS, managed security service, is your MSS. And that really is kind of your ultimate. That's your bigger offering. That's a full-fledged security service. It comes with remediation, a SIM, which is actually digesting and looking at the packets. It's looking at the events. It's monitoring, again, the behaviors within the network. And that, again, that's a higher end approach. We also have sensors and different points of access that we're collecting information from on the network. And so that's how you tie that holistically together, right? So you start at the firewall. If we're selling an SD-WAN, which is still a lot of SD-WAN sales coming in, we're starting there. And then we're talking about the endpoints, how are we protecting the endpoints? We're talking about their cloud applications. And then we're talking about that holistic approach to security and how much visibility. And really, when you talk about security, it is all about visibility, right?
So speaking of visibility, appreciate you laying all those things out. I think that helps give people understanding of the depth and the breadth of the product set. When we talk a little bit more about specifically visibility, on the one right before this, we were on with Jeff Hathcote from Solaris and talked about kind of the math behind why it doesn't make sense for somebody to go do their own SOC. I know you guys obviously have an opinion on that. You've achieved great economies of scale, and you got a great product with that. So I would love to now maybe dive into with regard to the SOC offering. It feels like a couple of years ago, people thought, no, I've got the teams, I've got the talent, I can watch this. The world isn't as bad of a place as it is now. But now we're talking lack of talent, lack of people, no automation. What do you see? What do you see your SOC offering doing, differentiating, and then maybe we'll, as you kind of lay the foundation for that, then we can kind of go into an example.
Well, yeah, first, there's a stat I always like to, and it's an important stat when we're talking about this. There's 3.5 million unfulfilled cybersecurity positions out there. So just open. And I was listening to something. It was a podcast back from 2019, and they were talking about like that was going to happen, and sure enough, it would happen. The other interesting thing that kind of ties into that story is the number one problem businesses have. Again, it's not technology. It's not even cybersecurity. In essence, the number one problem they have is like employee retention.
Yeah.
And number of employees. And we see that, right? We feel that if we go to restaurants nowadays, if we go to any kind of retail, like we know that they're understaffed. It's just an inherent problem. It's the same with it's the same with these companies. And you think about retention, right? So yeah, even if you can actually find your security person, and we'll go into why a security person doesn't work. But if you go and you find your security person, retaining that security person is going to be difficult because there's so many offers and so many people trying to get him. But when you look at security being a 24/7 job, and this is the need for the SOC, right? This is the real need for a SOC. It would take 6 full-time people to be able to truly manage your security system. Security is a 24/7 job. You can't sit there and rely on one guy. I said, even if you found one person, and then I kind of laughed because I was like, well, that one person, what's he doing on the weekend? What's he doing on Saturday at 2:30 in the morning? So that's really what we're seeing as far as that need and how we're helping customers with it. And I would say the trends are falling within the partner community. If you look at the number one solution right now, it's always UCaaS and CCaaS. I mean, that's what we always see across the board right now. And that's just because of the amount of phone systems and the replacement of old legacy PBX systems is still happening. So that's natural. But the two things we're seeing most rapidly catch up to UCaaS, CCaaS is security and managed services.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Right. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Now, how we approach it differently, again, is a holistic approach. When Comcast Business and Masergy looks at a security solution, we're deep diving in with the customer. We're not just looking at security. We're having to look at it under all the lenses. I talked earlier, right, about how you have to look at your voice collaboration, your network. But that's the approach that I think that we're taking differently. And I always say, if you have someone who just does security, go in and look at the security environment, that's all they're going to look at in that environment. But usually they're not going to expand into these other aspects that they're not comfortable with. Yeah. Voice collaboration, cloud applications, everything else. Same with a voice. You bring someone in who just does voice, well, then guess what? You're only going to talk about voice. Technology doesn't work like that anymore. We can't have single-threaded conversations. And the conversations that we're having with customers, I'd say, is a differentiator because our services are related around, and our conversations are around protecting the holistic environment, not just one aspect of it. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think you guys having that suite of services is really unique because you can talk about wherever they're at the branch, at the edge, needing voice, not watching that and correlating that. And I think to me, that's the secret that, we talk a lot about, and you see a lot of stats about dwell time, how long bad guys are in the environment before people even know. And to your point, I think you've got a great offering there that gives people that telemetry, and then not only gives them the telemetry, but then lets you actually take action on it on their behalf, right? To your point. So great overlay, I think, on the product.
Protecting more, I was going to throw out there too, that with us, we sell 2.7 solutions per opportunity. Because of that approach, we also are able to uncover more needs, because if you're having a security conversation, you don't know what you're protecting and who you're protecting, then you really can't expand that conversation. But then once you go into every aspect, again, I talk about that technological ecosystem. Now you're talking about voice. What are you doing with voice? Are you happy with voice? You're talking about network, you're talking about cloud, you're talking about applications. And the coolest thing for the partner community in my mind, and for the Telarus sellers, is I am limited by the capabilities of my technology with the conversation I can have. But you guys are unlimited, meaning that you have unlimited ways to overcome objections, unlimited routes to go, unlimited things you can talk about when it comes to technology, because you do it all. You're able to provide a solution in the entirety of every need of a company or every need that a customer has.
Yeah, makes our jobs easy. I always say setting up the appointment and knocking that down is way harder than us showing up and talking tech, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's bring this thing home here with an example. I would love to give me a situation that you got brought into. What were you told the need was? We can keep customer names out of this if need be, for sure. But I'm kind of curious. Did you get brought in and say, we just need a firewall? Can you come talk to us about what you guys can do with Fortinet? And then, reality, what did it amount to, right? If it started out weird or if it was exactly like it looked, but what did it replace? What did it do? What did it solve?
Yeah. Well, so if you don't mind, I've got one really quick one that's going to lean in on the managed Sentinel-1 and why that's it's such a low-hanging fruit for the partner community. And then I've got one that maybe we can dig in a little bit more. That's more of that holistic approach that starts somewhere and ends somewhere else, right? We were working with an ophthalmology company, and a partner brought us in on an ophthalmology company. They call me and they say, look, they already have a proof of concept with Sentinel-1 installed. Is it worth you guys talking to them? I mean, they really need help with management. They don't have a big staff. Do you guys even want to talk to them? I was like, yeah, let's at least see what they're doing to management, what it looked like. And 2,700 seats. I told you again, it starts at $7 a seat. We're actually able to get this down to $5.40, which was really cool. But we start there. We go in, we sit down, and once we start talking about the SOC capabilities and what the remediation, what we do with Sentinel-1, helping set up the environment, helping them understand the detect and protect of Sentinel-1. Of course, that's a bigger conversation. Going into how we fine tune the environment for best protection and then continue to monitor it, make sure it's updated. It easily made sense for them to actually be like, okay, we're just going to purchase Sentinel-1 from you guys with your SOC, right? So that managed Sentinel-1 made sense. And it's not that we're competing. Sentinel-1 still wins in that case, right? Because they're still getting that win. But when you throw that SOC and that management, the remediation, you always the MDR, what does the R stand for? Really response, but really what is that remediation? What are you doing? Yeah. It ended up being really a no-brainer, and they swung that over. Yeah. And then that partner actually brought us in on another 2,500 seat EDR or managed Sentinel-1 deal immediately after that we're able to win. And those turnaround times are like from the time we talked to the company to when we closed the deal and got signatures was a week and a half. Wow. The install was 30 days. So, I mean, that means the partner is getting paid very fast, and there's not as many problems as your traditional. Once you start throwing bandwidth and connectivity in a solution, right? It's like, who knows? So anyhow, that's kind of a quick one. But another one that I like to look at is it's a healthcare company, kind of back east. And we go in, we start having a conversation with them, and really they were needing some changes on their SD-WAN network. Now, we always hear, right, MPLS is dead, but private connectivity within SD-WAN isn't, which is kind of still that same idea with MPLS, right? Sometimes you need that private layer 2 connectivity to do some things that you can't do over public internet. So we start having a conversation about SD-WAN, and then remember that transition and that flow that I talked about with security. So of course we start talking about the security aspects and their needs within the router and firewall. And come to a need. Okay, well, definitely TMR, right? They have they're very short staff from an IT standpoint. I think they were running, it was like 4 total IT people on staff, and this is with over 40 locations. So now we're talking about TMR and firewall. Okay, and that's now we start probing, right? We start digging deeper into, okay, well, what else? Like, what are we protecting? What's going on in your environment? We always say it's people, processes, and technology. And that's the way we approach these conversations, right? So now we start talking about people, we start talking about the processes, and start finding out that they're not secured within that east-west traffic that we're talking about. They had a need for EDR. We also found out that they had a lot of work from home users. So they needed EMS. They needed the Fortinet client on there to be able to remote into the network, with EMS provides some additional like security functions on the endpoint through Fortinet and the Forti client. And then we also find out that they're in the middle of a Teams integration, right? What are you doing for voice? And now we get into the voice, and they need help with the Teams integration. We end up selling 500 seats of Teams Direct Connect. So by the time we're done, we're starting at maybe a $35,000 SD-WAN conversation. And we start talking about security, voice collaboration, and even some cloud peering that we were doing through our Equinix data exchange. This had grown into a $77,000 deal. Ooh. Now, fast forward another year after this is all done and installed, now we're looking over about $102,000 a month spend on this customer. And again, it starts small. I mean, 40, 30, that's not small, right? I understand 30 something. That's not small, but it starts on that smaller end. No. Once we start talking about security and holistically what we do, and you layer on top of that the customer experience. Again, whenever a customer calls into us, they're getting a engineer, not a ticket taker or anyone like that. It just made sense for them. It relieved so much pressure from them from a security standpoint, from a resource standpoint. And not only that, it actually grew their security posture to something formidable and respectable.
Love it. Good examples. Okay. So Ben, we're going to land this plane. I want you to look into your crystal ball. In Ben's humble opinion, we've done this 180 from where years ago people would not even let us put a managed any kind of box in their environment. Now we're managing whatever gear they have. We're augmenting that. We're putting edge software on with, things like Sentinel-1, all of these things. And now outsource SOC and everything that comes into that. So if you look out 6, 12, even 24 months, Where do you see this going? Do you see the CASB things being more prevalent? Do you see us staying down the course? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So there's two things that come to mind when I'm thinking about kind of the future, and there's two things that we're seeing that are very telling. One, less than 1% of cyber crimes are prosecuted. And if you think about that, I mean, obviously that's telling us, look, like cyber crimes are not going, it's not going away. I always ask, if less than 1% of bank robberies were prosecuted, how many of us would be out robbing banks, right?
Right.
Like it'd be
Right.
obviously bank robberies would be a huge problem, right? And I just think that we're going to see a rise in cyber crimes and even uniqueness and complexity of these crimes. Okay. Now, the next thing that I heard, this was the Forbes thing that I was talking about earlier, is that if we took every single person enrolled in, let's say, technology related college or training or what, even the MCSE stuff, right? All that stuff. We took everyone enrolled into taking care of technology problems or that eventual career path. We still want to be able to fulfill the cybersecurity shortage, right? And even with
Yeah.
all of them, and a lot of them aren't even going into right cybersecurity. A lot of them are in programming or different technology or different areas related to technology. So that problem, the people problem, is not going away. So I think what we're going to see is actually a continued and even a larger need for managed. Again, I talk about that managed services and managed SOC. And now we talked about the CASB, right? Things going to the cloud, all the different areas and vectors and new vectors of attack and vulnerabilities that are now available. It's going to cause a bigger need, again, for managed services and experts to be able to go in and truly secure the environment. I mean, that, like, really, I think it leans back to the managed services and security. It's just going to continue to be a problem that we have to address.
Good stuff. All right, man. Ben, that wraps us up for today. I really appreciate
Awesome.
you coming on and doing this with me, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was fun.
All right, everybody, that wraps us up. Security, why I should not run a SOC on my own. We got Ben Bohman, the director of Solution Engineering from the Comcast Masergy indirect channel side. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Until next time.
Next Level Biz Tech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.